It was almost midnight when the hospital lights began to dim in the hallways. Only the faint hum of machines and the distant beeping of monitors filled the air. Most nurses were ready to end their shift, but one nurse stayed behind. Her name was Claire. Claire sat at her small desk, rubbing her tired eyes. She had been on her feet for almost 14 hours. Her back ached, and her shoes were soaked from the heavy rain that had poured all evening. Still, she didn't complain. She looked at the clock, knowing she had one more patient to check before heading home. Outside, the storm had not stopped. Rain tapped against the window like 1,000 tiny fingers. Claire wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, gathered her things, and prepared to leave. As she walked toward the exit, she passed by the waiting area, empty, except for the faint smell of antiseptic and coffee. Then she noticed something unusual. Near the hospital entrance, half hidden under a broken umbrella, sat a man in torn clothes. His hair was messy and wet, his shoes were covered in mud, and he seemed to be shivering. Most people would have walked past without a second glance, but Claire stopped. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if he needed help. The security guard at the door glanced at the man and then looked away, clearly uninterested. Claire frowned. Something about the man's eyes caught her attention. They were tired but calm, sad yet strangely peaceful. She walked toward him slowly.
"Sir, are you all right?"
she asked softly. The man looked up. His face was pale and his voice was weak. "I'm fine. I just need a moment to rest." Claire could see he wasn't fine at all. His left arm had a fresh cut, bleeding lightly through the sleeve. "You're hurt," she said. "You can't stay out here in this rain. Come inside." The man shook his head. "No, I don't want to cause trouble. I'll be okay." But Claire wasn't the kind of person who could walk away. She gently took his arm and said, "Please, let me help you. You'll get sick if you stay out here." The man hesitated, then slowly stood up. His legs trembled as he followed her inside. Claire guided him to an empty bench near the nurse's station. She brought him a towel and some water. "What's your name?" she asked as she began cleaning his wound. "Daniel," he replied quietly. "Well, Daniel, I'm Claire. Try to stay still, okay? This might sting a little." He nodded. As she worked, Daniel watched her hands move quickly and carefully. She was tired, he could tell, but her touch was gentle. He wanted to thank her, but his voice caught in his throat. Claire finished cleaning the wound and wrapped it in a clean bandage. "There," she said, smiling softly. "It's not deep, but you should rest for a while. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" Daniel looked away. "No, not really," Claire sighed. "It's a cold night. There's a small shelter 2 blocks away. I can give you directions." He looked embarrassed. "I don't have any money," she bit her lip. Her own wallet was almost empty, but she knew what she had to do. She reached into her bag and pulled out a few crumpled bills. "Here. It's not much, but it should cover a meal and a place to sleep." Daniel stared at her. "You don't even know me," he said quietly. "I don't have to," Claire replied. "You're someone who needs help. That's enough." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside softened into a drizzle. The hospital felt unusually quiet, like the world had paused just for this small act of kindness. Finally, Daniel said, "Thank you. I'll pay you back someday." Claire smiled faintly. "Just take care of yourself. That's enough payment for me." She walked him to the door and gave him a small umbrella from the lost and found box. Daniel took it carefully like it was something precious. "Good night." "Daniel," she said. "Good night, Claire," he replied. And for the first time that night, he smiled. When Claire stepped back inside, the warmth of the hospital felt different. Maybe it was because she knew she had done something right, even if no one else had noticed. She returned to her desk to finish the paperwork. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since morning. She reached into her drawer and found a granola bar, half broken but still edible. As she ate, she looked around the quiet hospital. She thought of Daniel walking in the rain and hoped he would find a warm place to rest. Hours later, when she finally left for home, the streets were almost empty. Streetlights flickered and puddles reflected the glow like pieces of shattered glass. Claire's small apartment was only a few blocks away, but it felt like a long walk. Inside, she dropped her bag on the floor and collapsed on the couch. Her mother's photo sat on the shelf beside her, smiling brightly. Claire whispered, "I did something good today, Mom." The next morning came too soon. The alarm buzzed before dawn and Claire forced herself to get up. Another long shift waited. She made instant coffee, her only breakfast, and checked her mother's medication schedule before heading out again. At the hospital, things were hectic as always. There were new patients, new emergencies, and more paperwork than she could handle. Yet in the middle of it all, she found herself thinking about the man from last night. She wondered if he had eaten, if he had found the shelter, if he was all right. That evening, as she left the building, she noticed someone standing by the same bench near the entrance. It was Daniel. He looked cleaner now. His clothes were still old but not soaked anymore. He smiled when he saw her. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "You helped me when no one else did." Claire felt a small warmth in her chest. "I'm glad you're okay. How's your arm?" "Better," he said, showing the bandage. "You did a great job," she laughed softly. "I do this every day." "Yes, but not everyone does it with kindness," he said. Claire didn't know what to say. For a moment she felt shy under his steady gaze. "Well, you take care of yourself, all right?" He nodded. "I will." From that day, Daniel started showing up every few days. Not as a patient, but just to say hello. Sometimes he brought coffee for her during her night shifts. Sometimes they just talked for a few minutes. He never asked for anything, and she never asked too many questions. He told her small stories about traveling, about how people treated others based on appearance. Claire listened quietly, never judging him. She liked his calm voice. One night, as they sat near the hospital's vending machine, Daniel asked her, "Why did you help me that first night?" Claire shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe because I've been where you were. Not on the street, but I know what it's like to feel invisible. People pass by like you don't exist." Daniel's expression softened. "That's rare to care like that." Claire smiled faintly. "It's not rare. People just forget sometimes." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to remember something important. Then he said, "I hope one day someone will do the same for you." Claire didn't know it then, but his words would come true in a way she could never imagine. That night, after he left, Claire sat alone in the break room. She thought about her life, her mother's illness, her endless bills, the exhaustion that never went away. But for some reason, she felt lighter. It wasn't because her problems were gone. It was because, for once, she had connected with someone who saw her not just as a nurse, but as a person. And somewhere outside in the quiet city, Daniel walked down the dark street, thinking about the nurse who treated him with kindness when everyone else turned away. He looked up at the glowing hospital sign one last time and whispered to himself, "She has no idea who I really am, but she will." And with that, he disappeared into the night. A few days had passed since that rainy night when Claire helped Daniel, the man in rags. The hospital went back to its usual chaos. Patients rushing in, phones ringing, doctors shouting instructions, and nurses hurrying down the hallways. Claire was used to it. She moved like clockwork, calm but quick even when her body begged for rest. Still, every now and then, her mind went back to Daniel. She wondered where he had gone after that night. She didn't expect to see him again. People like him often vanished, swallowed up by the city and its cold streets. But she had done what she could. That was enough, she told herself. It was a bright morning, though the air outside was still heavy from last night's rain. Claire was restocking medicine trays at the nurse's station when she heard a quiet voice behind her. "Good morning, Claire." She turned, surprised. There he was, Daniel, standing with a shy smile, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "You again," she said, trying not to sound too surprised. "I figured you could use a coffee," he said, handing one to her. She hesitated. "You didn't have to. I wanted to. It's the least I could do after everything you did for me." She took the cup with a smile. "Thank you. You look better now," he nodded. His clothes were still simple but clean. The deep exhaustion in his face seemed lighter now. "I've been doing odd jobs here and there," he said, trying to get back on my feet. "That's good," Claire replied. "One step at a time, right?" Daniel smiled. "Exactly." They sat down for a few minutes, sipping their coffee quietly. It was strange how easy it felt to talk to him. Claire didn't usually open up to strangers, but there was something calm about Daniel. He spoke gently, like someone who had seen enough of life to understand silence. "So, do you work here every day?" he asked, almost. 6 days a week, sometimes 7, she said. "It's tiring, but it's what I love doing. Helping people." "Yes, even if it's hard sometimes." He looked around the hospital. "It must be tough." seeing people come and go, not all of them walking out healthy. Claire sighed. You get used to it. You learn to focus on the ones who make it. That's what keeps you going. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. You're stronger than most people I know. She laughed a little. You don't know me that well. He looked at her and said softly, Maybe not yet. There was a pause, a quiet moment that made her heart skip. She quickly stood up and said, I should get back to work. Thank you for the coffee. Daniel smiled. I'll see you around then. And he did. He started coming by once or twice a week. Sometimes he brought coffee, sometimes just a small snack. Other times he'd just sit in the waiting area, chatting with the receptionist or reading an old newspaper. The hospital staff grew used to seeing him around. To most people, he looked like a quiet man with little to his name. But to Claire, he seemed different, curious, observant, and strangely thoughtful. He often asked her questions about her work, about the patients, the hospital rules, and even the way supplies were handled. At first, she found it odd. Why would a man like him care about hospital operations? But he always framed his questions kindly, like he genuinely wanted to learn. One evening, during her break, Claire found him sitting outside near the hospital garden. He had brought sandwiches. You should eat, he said when she joined him. You look exhausted. She smiled. You sound like my mother. He grinned. That's probably a compliment. They ate quietly for a while. Then Daniel said, Do you ever feel like life keeps testing you? Like no matter how hard you work, it never gets easier? Claire looked at the dark sky above them. Every day, she said softly. But I guess that's life. You just keep going. Daniel nodded slowly. You must have a lot on your plate. I do, she admitted. My mother's been sick for a while. I take care of her when I'm not here. It's hard, but she's all I have. Daniel looked at her with quiet admiration. That's brave, Claire smiled faintly. Not really, just necessary. He leaned back on the bench. Most people wouldn't do half of what you do, she shrugged. Maybe they would if they loved someone enough. There was something in the way she said it that made Daniel's chest tighten. He had met many people in his life, people with money, power, and privilege. But he had never met someone like Claire, someone who could find grace in struggle. After that day, their conversations grew longer. Sometimes they talked about simple things, the weather, favorite foods, dreams they once had. Other times they fell into deeper talks about life and purpose. Claire learned that Daniel had once been in business, but had left it all behind for reasons he never explained. He said he was trying to understand people better, to live without labels. She didn't press him for more. She respected his silence. One night after a long shift, Claire found Daniel waiting outside again. He was holding a small paper bag. What's that? She asked. Dinner, he said. You skipped lunch again, she laughed. You're starting to sound like my conscience. Someone's got to make sure you eat, he replied with a grin. They sat on the steps sharing the food under the soft streetlights. It wasn't much, just bread, soup, and apples, but it felt comforting. As they ate, Daniel said quietly, You know, people often ignore those who help them. But I don't think I could ever forget what you did for me. Claire looked at him curiously. It wasn't a big deal. Anyone would have done the same. He shook his head. No, most people wouldn't have stopped that night. You did. That changes things. His tone was serious, almost heavy. Claire didn't know what to say. She just smiled awkwardly and took another bite of bread. After that, Daniel disappeared for a few days. Claire didn't see him around the hospital, and for some reason it bothered her. She tried to tell herself it didn't matter. He was just someone she had helped. But part of her missed their quiet talks. Then one rainy afternoon she found him again, sitting by the same bench where she first saw him. Where have you been? She asked, her voice sharper than she meant. He looked up with a small smile. Working. I found something temporary at the docks. Is it safe? She asked. Safe enough, he said. Hard work, but it feels good to earn something again. She nodded. That's good. I'm glad. Daniel looked at her carefully. You were worried. Claire laughed a little, embarrassed. Maybe a little, he smiled. That's kind of nice to hear. From that day, things between them began to change slowly. There was a quiet connection forming, unspoken, gentle, and warm. They weren't just nurse and patient anymore. They were two people who found comfort in each other's presence. But Claire didn't know that behind Daniel's calm eyes there was a secret. He wasn't just an ordinary man trying to rebuild his life. Every time he asked her about hospital supplies or patient care, it wasn't out of curiosity, it was part of something bigger. Daniel was taking notes, quietly observing. The hospital Claire worked in was one of the many under his company's ownership. He had come disguised as an ordinary man to see how things truly were, to see how his employees were treated, how patients were cared for, and whether compassion still existed in his hospitals. And he had found his answer in Claire. She was proof that kindness still lived, even in a place weighed down by exhaustion and struggle. One evening, as Daniel walked Claire out after her shift, she said, "You know, you never really told me where you're from." He looked ahead and said softly, "Let's just say, I used to live a very different life." "Different how?" she asked, curious. He paused. "One with more money than meaning." She looked at him, puzzled. "You don't seem like the type to care about money." He smiled faintly. Not anymore. She didn't ask further. She had learned that Daniel was a man who revealed things only when he was ready. As they reached the street, he turned to her and said, "You remind me of what's real, Claire. People like you are rare." She blinked, surprised. "That's a big compliment." "It's the truth," he said. "Don't ever change that." She smiled shyly and said goodnight. But after she left, Daniel stood under the streetlight watching her walk away. His thoughts were heavy. He knew he couldn't keep hiding forever. Someday soon she'd learn who he really was, and he wasn't sure how she'd react. The next morning, Claire's supervisor handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter addressed to the hospital administration. It announced that an inspection team from the company's main office would be visiting soon. The staff buzzed with anxiety. Such visits were rare and often meant big changes. Claire didn't think much of it. She was too busy with patients to worry. But somewhere in the city, Daniel was preparing for that very visit, ready to return as the man behind the name on the letterhead. He thought about Claire, the nurse who had shown him compassion without knowing who he was, and for the first time in a long while he felt nervous, not as a businessman, but as a man who had found someone genuine in a world full of pretense. That night, he sat alone in his apartment, staring at the city lights through the window. He whispered to himself, "Soon she'll know the truth. I just hope she'll still see me the same way." Meanwhile, Claire worked late again, completely unaware that the quiet man she had shared sandwiches with was actually the reason her hospital even existed. She had no idea her life was about to change forever, and neither of them knew that this simple bond born from a rainy night and an act of kindness was about to turn into something far deeper than either could have imagined. The days that followed were busy and long. The hospital was preparing for the company's inspection visit, and everyone was on edge. Notices were pinned on the walls. Staff were told to smile more, and supervisors walked around with clipboards pretending to check everything. Claire didn't care much about the inspection. She had seen these things before. People running around trying to look perfect for a day or two, only to go back to the same routine afterward. For her, what mattered was her patients, but deep down something else was bothering her. Daniel hadn't shown up in over a week. At first she told herself he was just busy. Maybe his dock work had kept him late. Maybe he had moved to another part of the city. But as the days turned into a week and then two, she started to worry. She didn't even have his number. He had become such a constant presence that his absence felt heavier than she expected. She often found herself glancing at the bench outside the hospital where they used to sit. Every time she walked past it, she half expected to see him there, smiling with that quiet warmth that made her days a little easier. But it stayed empty. One rainy afternoon, Claire walked home slower than usual. The air was cold and her umbrella was leaking. She stopped at a small grocery store to pick up her mother's medicine. The cashier handed her the change with a tired smile, and she realized she was counting every coin again. Money had been tight for months, but now it was worse. Her mother's health had declined and new tests were needed, tests she couldn't afford. That night, she sat by her mother's bedside, holding her hand as the older woman coughed softly. "Are you eating enough, Claire?" her mother asked in a weak voice. Claire smiled. "Don't worry about me. You just rest, okay?" Her mother gave her a look that only mothers can give, the kind that sees through every lie. "You've lost weight," Claire laughed lightly. "Maybe a little." "You work too much, my dear," her mother whispered. "You need rest." You can't save everyone if you break down yourself. Claire brushed her hand gently. I'm okay, Mom, I promise, but she wasn't. She was exhausted, both in body and heart. A few nights later, Claire returned to the hospital for another night shift. The rain had been falling for hours and thunder echoed through the sky. The city felt quiet, almost lonely. As she entered the building, one of the receptionists whispered, Did you hear? The inspection is tomorrow. The big boss himself might be coming. Claire smiled faintly. Well, maybe he'll fix the air conditioner in the staff room. Everyone laughed. The tension eased for a moment, but Claire didn't know that the big boss they were talking about was none other than Daniel, the man she had bandaged that rainy night, the one who brought her coffee and shared sandwiches under the streetlight. He was coming back. That night, she stayed busy with patients. Around midnight, she finally took a short break. She went outside to the same bench where she and Daniel had once talked. The rain had stopped, but the air was cool and damp. She sat there for a while, lost in thought. She remembered how Daniel used to listen to her without judgment, how he always seemed genuinely interested in her stories, how his eyes softened every time she smiled. She whispered to herself, Where did you go, Daniel? Her words disappeared into the night. The next morning came with an unusual buzz. Staff were running around, fixing flowers, checking supplies and making sure the hospital looked spotless. A line of black cars arrived just after 9 a.m. Claire didn't pay much attention. She was in the pediatric ward, helping a little boy with his bandages. The sound of footsteps and formal voices echoed through the corridor. Then she heard someone behind her say, Excuse me, Nurse Claire? She turned around and froze. Standing there, dressed in a tailored suit, was Daniel. His hair was neatly combed, his shoes polished, and his confident posture made him look like someone completely different. For a moment, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. Daniel? She whispered. He smiled, the same warm smile she remembered. Hello, Claire, she blinked, confused. What is this? Why are you… Before she could finish, her supervisor hurried in, beaming nervously. Claire! Please meet Mr. Hayes, the owner of this entire hospital network. Claire's mouth went dry. She turned back to Daniel, no, Mr. Hayes, and saw the truth in his eyes. The quiet man in rags she had helped, the one who said he was just trying to get back on his feet, was in fact the powerful businessman everyone was whispering about. She felt her heart sink. I know this must be a shock, Daniel said softly. Can we talk for a moment? Her voice trembled. I have work to do. Please, he said gently. Just 5 minutes. Reluctantly, she followed him to the hospital garden, the same spot where they used to eat together. I wanted to tell you, he began, but I needed you to see me for who I am, not for what I have. Claire looked at him. Her expression hurt. You lied to me. I didn't lie, he said quietly. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing, she said bitterly. You let me think you were struggling, living off small jobs. I gave you money that night, money I barely had, and all this time you were… Her voice cracked. You were rich. Daniel stepped closer, but she took a step back. I wasn't trying to fool you, he said. I needed to understand what life was really like in my hospitals. I wanted to see the truth, not the reports, not the polished presentations. I disguised myself to learn what people go through here. And then I met you. Claire looked down, fighting the sting in her eyes. So what was I? Part of your research? No, he said firmly. You were the best thing that happened to me. You showed me what kindness really means. She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. You should have trusted me with the truth. Daniel looked genuinely pained. You're right. I made a mistake. I didn't want to lose the only person who treated me like a human being, not a name on a company wall. Claire turned away, her heart heavy. You already lost that? Before he could say more, her pager beeped. A patient needed her. Without another word, she walked away. Daniel stood there, staring after her, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Helplessness. For the rest of the day, Claire avoided him. She focused on her patients, forcing a smile when people talked about how charming the company's owner was. Every compliment she heard made her chest tighten. That night, when she finally got home, she sat in silence for a long time. She replayed every moment they had shared. The rain, the coffee, the small laughs. All of it now felt like a cruel trick. Her mother noticed her silence. You look upset, she said softly. Claire tried to smile. It's nothing, Mom, just a long day. Her mother studied her face. It's about that man you used to talk about, isn't it? Claire froze. How did you? A mother knows, she said gently. You mentioned him more than once. Claire looked down. He wasn't who I thought he was. Her mother smiled sadly. People rarely are. But tell me, was the person you saw in him real? Or was that also a lie? Claire hesitated. The Daniel she had known wasn't arrogant or cold. He had been gentle, humble, and kind. I don't know anymore, she whispered. Her mother reached for her hand. Maybe the truth isn't as simple as it looks. Don't close your heart just yet. The next few days passed in silence between them. Daniel respected her space but still came to the hospital. He watched from a distance as she moved through the hallways, caring for patients with the same warmth that had once captured his attention. He wanted to talk to her again but didn't know how. Every time their eyes met, she turned away. One afternoon, as Claire was leaving, she found an envelope on her locker. Inside was a handwritten note. I never meant to hurt you. You changed how I see the world. I'll wait for as long as it takes. Daniel. She folded the letter, unsure how to feel. Part of her wanted to forgive him, but another part still felt betrayed. That night, while doing her rounds, she saw Daniel standing near the pediatric ward window, talking softly with a little girl who had been admitted for weeks. He had brought her a stuffed toy. The girl's face lit up as he spoke, and for a moment, Claire saw the same kindness she'd known in him before the truth came out. It confused her even more. When he noticed her, he smiled faintly, but she turned away before he could approach. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Claire's supervisor called her into the office. There's been a donation, the supervisor said, handing her a paper. Someone covered all your mother's hospital expenses. Every single one. Claire stared at the document, speechless. Who? There's no name, the supervisor said. It was anonymous. Her heart knew who it was. That night, she sat by her mother's bedside again. Her mother was smiling for the first time in weeks. You look lighter, she said. Claire smiled weakly. Someone helped us, Mom. I just don't know if I should be happy or angry about it. Her mother squeezed her hand. Maybe both. Outside, rain began to fall again, just like the night she had first met Daniel. Claire looked out the window and whispered, Why did you have to be someone else? Across the city, Daniel sat alone in his apartment, staring at his phone. He wanted to call her, to explain again, but he knew words wouldn't be enough. He had seen what real struggle looked like through her eyes, and it had changed him. He picked up a photo from his desk, a picture of the hospital's founding team, himself standing proudly in the center. He no longer saw success the same way. Now, success looked like a tired nurse with gentle hands and a kind heart. He whispered to himself, I'll make it right, Claire, somehow. And while the world outside went on with its usual noise, two hearts beat quietly in different corners of the city, connected by one act of kindness, broken by truth, and waiting for something neither of them could yet name. The hospital was quieter than usual that morning. The big inspection was finally over, and everyone seemed to breathe a little easier. But for Claire, peace was still far away. It had been 2 weeks since she found out who Daniel really was. She still couldn't wrap her head around it. Every time she thought about him, her chest tightened, not out of anger anymore, but confusion. He had lied, but he had also been kind. He had hidden the truth, but he had helped her mother without taking credit. She didn't know which version of him to believe, the man in rags who made her laugh, or the powerful businessman who had deceived her. She had tried to push him out of her mind, but memories had a way of sneaking back in. Every time she passed the hospital garden, she could almost hear his voice again. That morning, Claire sat in the break room with her coffee, staring blankly at the wall. One of her co-workers, a cheerful nurse named Linda, noticed her mood. You okay? Linda asked, sitting beside her. Claire nodded faintly. Just tired. You've been just tired for 2 weeks, Linda said with a teasing smile. Something's going on. Claire forced a small laugh. It's nothing serious. Linda gave her a look that said she didn't believe a word. I've seen that face before. You're thinking about someone. Claire sighed. Maybe, Linda grinned. Ah, I knew it. Who is he? It's complicated, Claire said quietly. He's not who I thought he was. Linda tilted her head. Did he hurt you? Claire thought for a moment before answering. Not exactly, he just wasn't honest. But he's not a bad person. Linda patted her shoulder. If he's not a bad person, maybe you should hear him out. Claire smiled weakly. Maybe she didn't tell Linda who it was. She didn't think anyone would believe her if she said she'd been having coffee with the owner of the hospital network. Later that afternoon, Claire was helping an elderly patient when the receptionist rushed into the ward. "Claire, you're needed in the conference room." "Right now?" Claire frowned. "Why?" "I'm in the middle of—" "It's important," the receptionist said, her voice low. "Mr. Hayes asked for you by name." Claire froze. Her heart thudded in her chest. "What?" The receptionist nodded. "He said it's urgent." Claire hesitated, unsure whether to go. But refusing would only draw attention. She handed the patient's chart to another nurse and walked toward the conference room, her palms sweating. When she entered, Daniel was standing near the window looking out at the city. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Claire," he said softly. "Mr. Hayes," she replied, keeping her voice formal. The other managers and staff in the room quickly finished their greetings and left, sensing the tension. When the door closed, silence filled the space. "I didn't mean to put you on the spot," Daniel said, "but I needed to see you." Claire folded her arms, trying to stay calm. "You could have called me. I wasn't sure you'd answer." "You're right," she said flatly. He sighed. "I know you're still angry, and you have every right to be, but I need you to understand why I did what I did." Claire looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You wanted to see how your hospitals were running." "I get that. But did you have to pretend to be someone else?" "Yes," he said quietly. "Because when people see my name, they see money, not me. They tell me what I want to hear, not what's true. I needed to see the real world, the one my decisions affect." She didn't respond. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I saw nurses skipping meals to help patients. I saw staff staying late without pay. I saw broken systems that needed fixing. But what changed me most was seeing you." Her eyes flickered. "Don't. Please just listen," he said. "You treated me like a person when no one else would. You gave me your time, your care, and even your last few bills without expecting anything back. I've never met anyone like you, Claire. That night changed everything for me." Her throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "You could have told me the truth sooner." "I know," he said, guilt heavy in his tone. "And I'm sorry. I just didn't know how." There was a long pause. Claire finally said, "I don't know if I can trust you again." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand. But even if you never forgive me, I'll still do what I came here to do. This hospital deserves better, and so do you." Before she could ask what he meant, he handed her a folder. Inside were documents, plans for new staff facilities, better pay scales, and funding for medical supplies. "I started the approval process myself," he said. "These changes are happening because of what I saw through your eyes." Claire stared at the papers. She didn't know what to say. "I didn't do this to make you forgive me," he continued. "I did it because it's right." She closed the folder and looked up at him. For the first time in weeks, her anger began to soften. "You really mean this?" He nodded. "Every word," she exhaled slowly. "You're still impossible to figure out." He smiled faintly. "I'll take that as progress." Before she could respond, someone knocked on the door. A young nurse peeked in. "Mr. Hayes, the media team is here for your interview." Daniel nodded. "I'll be right there." Then he looked at Claire. "Can we talk again later?" "Off the record this time." She hesitated, but finally said, "We'll see." That evening, after her shift ended, Claire watched the live news feed playing on the waiting room TV. Daniel was giving a public address about reforms in the hospital network. He spoke about compassion, fairness, and valuing the people who worked behind the scenes. He didn't mention names, but she knew who he was referring to when he said, "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change how we see everything." When the cameras turned off, the staff clapped quietly. Claire sat in the back, unsure how to feel. The next day, she found another letter in her locker. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you'll see that what you did mattered, not just to me, but to thousands of people. D." For some reason, that note felt different. It wasn't an apology this time. It was gratitude. That evening, as she walked home, she noticed someone waiting by the old bench near the entrance. Daniel stood there holding 2 cups of coffee, the same way it had all started. She stopped a few feet away. "You're still here?" "I promised I wouldn't give up," he said with a gentle smile. "I thought maybe we could talk." She hesitated, then sat down beside him. "I don't know where to start." "Maybe we just start with coffee," he said, handing her a cup. They sat quietly for a while. The city lights shimmered in puddles left by the rain. The smell of wet earth filled the air. Claire finally broke the silence. Do you ever wish you weren't who you are? That you could just be normal? He chuckled softly. Every day. But I'm learning that what matters isn't who people think I am. It's what I do with it. She nodded, staring at her reflection in the coffee. I guess we both learned something then. He smiled. What did you learn? That people aren't always what they seem, she said. Sometimes they're better. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. There was a quiet understanding between them now. Not perfect forgiveness, but something close to peace. Over the next few weeks, things began to change around the hospital. New equipment arrived. The staff room got renovated. Lunch breaks were enforced. Everyone noticed the difference. One day, the head nurse announced that the hospital had received a new fund for staff welfare, sponsored anonymously. Everyone clapped and cheered. Claire didn't have to guess who was behind it. That night, she found Daniel in the garden again, talking to a patient's family. He looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. When he noticed her, he smiled. Long day? He asked. She nodded. Always. Still skipping meals? Maybe, she said, smiling slightly. He laughed softly. Some things never change. There was a comfortable silence. Finally, she said, You've done a lot of good lately. I just followed your example, he said. You showed me how small acts can mean everything. She looked at him for a moment and then said quietly, You know, I'm not angry anymore. Just surprised that life works in such strange ways. He smiled. It does, but maybe that's how miracles start. She laughed softly. You really think this is a miracle? I think you are, he said. She blushed, looking away. You're still saying too much. Maybe, he said with a grin. But it's true. When she looked back at him, she saw not the Tycoon or the man in rags, but just Daniel. The person who had become part of her life in ways she hadn't expected. Before she left, he said, Claire, can I ask one thing? What is it? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Would you come to the hospital gala next week? As my guest. No business, no titles, just us. She paused, thinking. Part of her wanted to say no, to avoid the attention. But another part of her wanted to see where this path would lead. Finally, she smiled. All right. As friends, he smiled back. As friends. But deep down, they both knew it was more than that. That night, as Claire walked home, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The kind that comes when forgiveness finally replaces pain. And somewhere behind her, Daniel watched her disappear into the glow of the streetlights. His heart full of quiet gratitude, he whispered to himself. Not yet, but soon. The night of the hospital gala arrived faster than anyone expected. The entire building buzzed with excitement. For once, it wasn't about emergencies or night shifts. It was about celebrating the people who made everything possible. Claire had never been to such an event before. She wasn't used to wearing anything fancy. She stood in front of her small mirror, adjusting the simple blue dress she had borrowed from a friend. It wasn't expensive, but it made her feel different, lighter somehow. Her mother, who was now recovering well, watched her from the bed with a proud smile. You look beautiful, she said softly. Claire blushed. It's just a dress. It's not the dress, her mother said. It's you. You look happy. Claire paused, her lips curving into a shy smile. Maybe I am. As she left for the event, she told herself it was just a gala, nothing more. She was only going because Daniel had asked her as a friend. But deep down, something inside her stirred. Maybe curiosity. Maybe hope. The venue was breathtaking. The hospital's main hall had been transformed with lights, flowers, and music. Doctors, nurses, and staff mingled together, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen them. For once, there were no patients to attend to. No alarms ringing in the background, just laughter and soft conversation. When Claire stepped inside, heads turned. People were surprised to see her out of her usual scrubs. Linda, her co-worker, rushed up to her with a grin. Wow, look at you, Linda exclaimed. You clean up well. Claire laughed. You're one to talk. You look amazing. They chatted for a while before the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the start of the event. The master of ceremonies stepped up to the stage and welcomed everyone. He spoke about the year's achievements, the challenges, and the dedication of the staff. Then he introduced the man behind the reforms that had changed the hospital, Mr. Daniel Hayes. The crowd erupted into applause as Daniel walked onto the stage. Claire felt her heart skip a beat. He looked calm and confident, dressed in a dark suit that made him seem even taller. But his eyes, they were the same kind ones she had seen that night in the rain. Daniel began speaking, his voice steady and sincere. When I first came here months ago, I wasn't looking for praise or attention. I was looking for truth. The truth about what really happens in the places that carry my name. He paused, glancing toward the crowd. What I found wasn't just hardworking people. I found compassion. I found courage. And I found one person who reminded me that kindness still exists in its purest form. The audience clapped politely, but Claire's chest tightened. She looked down, already guessing who he meant. Daniel continued. That kindness changed how I see everything. It reminded me that behind every hospital room and every shift, there are hearts that keep beating for others. He concluded his speech with a promise. More reforms, more support, more fairness. When he finished, the crowd rose to their feet in applause. After the ceremony, soft music filled the hall as people mingled and danced. Claire tried to stay near the edges, sipping juice and talking to colleagues. She didn't want to draw attention. But she knew Daniel would find her eventually, and he did. He appeared beside her quietly, like he always did, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. I didn't see you at first, he said. You almost blended in with the crowd. She smiled slightly. That's kind of the point. He chuckled. You shouldn't hide. You're the reason we're all here tonight. She shook her head. You give me too much credit. Not enough, he said softly. For a moment, they just stood there, the music playing around them, the lights reflecting in their eyes. Then Daniel said, Would you walk with me? Without answering, she followed him out to the hospital garden, the same garden where they had shared so many conversations. It was quiet there, the sound of distant laughter drifting from the hall. The air was cool and the moonlight painted silver edges on everything it touched. They stopped near the bench. Daniel turned to her. I know I said we'd come here as friends, he began, but the truth is I can't pretend anymore. Claire's heart started to race. She tried to look away, but his voice held her still. I came here months ago pretending to be someone else, he said. But in that disguise I found the most real thing I've ever known. You showed me what it means to care without reason, to give without expecting anything back. Daniel, she started, but he gently shook his head. Let me finish, he said softly. You changed me, Claire. You changed how I see the world, how I live, how I lead. Every decision I make now, I think of that night. The night you helped a stranger because your heart told you to. Her eyes began to glisten, but she stayed silent. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it slowly, he revealed a simple ring, elegant but not flashy. I'm not here as a tycoon, he said. Not as the man with money or power. I'm here as the man you once gave a blanket and a cup of tea to. And that man is asking you, will you let me be part of your life? Will you let me stand beside you, not above you? For a moment, Claire couldn't breathe. Tears welled up and she looked down at the ring, then back at him. Daniel, she whispered. This is crazy. Maybe it is, he said gently. But so is everything that brought us here. She let out a shaky laugh. You don't even know what kind of life I live. It's messy. I work long hours, I barely have time for myself, and I don't belong in your world. He smiled softly. Then I'll come to yours. She shook her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. Why me? Because when everyone else looked away, you didn't, he said. Because you saw a person, not a title. And because I can't imagine my life without you in it. The words hung in the air, trembling with sincerity. Claire took a deep breath. You really mean this? He nodded. More than anything. There was a long silence, broken only by the faint sound of music from inside. Claire stared at the ring again, her heart torn between fear and something that felt like love. Finally, she whispered, You don't owe me anything, Daniel. I didn't help you for a reward. I know, he said. That's exactly why this means everything. She smiled through her tears. You really are impossible, he laughed softly. I'll take that as a yes. She hesitated for one more second, then nodded slowly. Yes. Daniel's eyes lit up, relief and joy flooding his face. He slipped the ring onto her finger gently, then pulled her into a quiet embrace. For the first time in a long while, Claire let herself feel it. Happiness. Not the fleeting kind, but the deep, real kind that fills every corner of your heart. When they finally pulled apart, she looked at him and said, "You know this means I'll keep you in check, right? No more hiding, no more disguises," he smiled. "Deal. But only if you promise not to skip meals anymore," she laughed, wiping her tears. "We'll see about that." They stood there under the soft glow of the garden lights, their laughter mixing with the rustle of leaves. Inside, the music played a slow tune, but out here everything felt timeless. The next few weeks passed like a dream. News of Daniel's engagement to a nurse spread quietly, though he made sure to protect Claire's privacy. He didn't want the story to be about wealth or status. He wanted it to be about kindness. At work, nothing really changed for Claire. She still took long shifts, still helped patients, still smiled at everyone who walked into her ward. But there was something different in her now. A calmness, a light that others noticed even if they didn't know why. Her mother often teased her. "You saved a man in rags and he came back with a ring," she said one evening, laughing softly. Claire would blush and say, "It wasn't about saving him. It was about doing the right thing." But deep down, she knew that sometimes doing the right thing could lead to something beautiful. Months later, during a quiet evening, Claire and Daniel visited the same spot where they had first met, outside the ER, where the rain had fallen and her kindness had changed both their lives. Daniel looked around, smiling. "Hard to believe this is where it all started." Claire nodded, a soft smile on her lips. "I almost didn't stop that night." "I'm glad you did," he said. She looked at him. "So am I." They stood there for a while, the city lights flickering in the distance. Claire thought about everything that had happened, the struggles, the loneliness, the nights she cried silently, and the stranger who became her partner. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs, and whispered, "Kindness costs nothing, but sometimes it changes everything." Daniel smiled, taking her hand. "It changed me." And with that, they walked away together, not as a nurse and a tycoon, not as two people from different worlds, but as two souls who had found each other in the most unexpected way. The rain began to fall again, softly this time, like a quiet blessing from the sky. They didn't run for cover. They just stood there smiling as the world around them faded into the gentle rhythm of the rain. It was not a fairy tale, not a perfect story. It was simply life, messy, unpredictable, but filled with moments that made it all worthwhile. And somewhere in that small city hospital, a nurse's story became a reminder to everyone that kindness, no matter how small, can change lives, heal hearts, and sometimes even bring love where you least expect it.